We're here today with Jack Head,
Yes.
who served in Vietnam and is willing to share some of his experience and time with us today. Jack, would you tell us about your service and when and where you went and what you did?
I was a reluctant contributor. Laney McGraw and I were in college together, and that kept me deferred.
Mm-hmm.
Then we got married. That kept me deferred until they needed me anyway. And I got my Dear Jack letter, and so I was drafted.
Okay.
And went to Louisville, took my one step forward, and volunteered, as that's what it says on paper.
Mm-hmm.
Went to Fort Knox for basic training, and was sent to Fort Polk, Louisiana, for my advanced individual training. If you went there, you know where you were going.
Right.
In fact, I went to Tigerland. That's where we were trained.
Oh, did you? Okay.
And Fort Polk. It wasn't a good experience at all. Typically, before going overseas, you get 30 days to get your life in order before you go overseas.
Right.
And they decided we weren't even getting that. From the time I was drafted till I went to Vietnam, I'd had one 24-hour pass and one 12-hour pass, period, in all the training.
That sounds like you were in a rush.
Well, we had been, as a country, ill-prepared for the '68 Tet Offensive.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted a lot of new people over there for the '69 Tet Offensive, and so I was part of the Tet Offensive build-up. I got to Cam Ranh Bay and was reassigned, and it's just dominoes falling. You don't know where you're going until they tell you where you're going, and you're telling.
Right.
At this time, I'm 11 Charlie,
Mm-hmm.
Which didn't mean much to me because we had 1 week of training on mortars of all the training I'd ever had.
11 Charlie is mortar.
Is mortar, yes, my MOS, So we get sent up to High Corps, which is the Americal Division. It's a bastard division.
Mm-hmm.
It was formed in World War II when they needed a bunch of people and a bunch of things to do something or other. So they just brought a little of this and this from all over the world, and they brought them together. And then after World War II, they disbanded it. They brought it back together again in Korea, but didn't get it done in time, and so never served. And they reactivated it for Vietnam. And so most of the units that came there didn't know each other. They
Right.
never worked together. But it's Americal, and it's the patch is the Southern Cross, the constellation.
Right.
Because it's never
Right.
served north of the equator.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only division that's ever been named. All the rest of them are numbered. So it's really a weird one. So I get up to Da Nang and then fly down to Chu Lai. And in Chu Lai, I'm told I'm going to be in the 11th Light Infantry Brigade. Still don't know what most of that is because
Right.
we had been trained on names and numbers and things like that. We got to Duc Pho, which is a village in Vietnam, and there's a fire base there of a number of units, and it's southern part of High Corps. There's this much beach, and then the mountains just shoot straight up.
Mm-hmm.
The water is very, very deep there. Beautiful country, beautiful. And when I get to Duc Pho, I get in this Jeep with this kid, and I, of course, having watched lots of movies, asked him, "How long have you been here?" This kid, he looked at me and goes, "I don't know." But he could tell me the number of days he had left. in country.
Counting down.
Counting down to the number of hours left in country. And so that was my new terminology to learn was
Right.
we were going, if you live long enough, you'll be in Vietnam for 1 year, period. The only thing the military's ever done right to me is get me out on the day they said they were going to get me out. So I end up in Echo Company. I don't know the difference between Alpha Company and Echo Company, but Echo Company is made up of 2 platoons. One is mortars, 4-deuce mortars, 4.2-inch mortars. The guns are about this big around. They weigh 600 pounds. Can shoot.
The most accurate mortar
Yeah.
that we have.
Although, a side note, ours were made prior to 1950 and had yellow tags on them. Unsafe to fire within 500 meters of friendlies. But that's okay. That's a side story. So I walk into this guy, and in front of me is a supply sergeant. And just by happen, they needed somebody in mortar platoon because just as easily he could have put me in recon. And you know what recon is because
Right.
that's what you served in.
Right.
And it wasn't a pleasant place.
Well, it depends on your perspective.
Well,
But-
interesting. Yes. Because I was, after a few days there, I was sent to where I would be serving. I'd been sitting on a helipad for about a day and a half, waiting for a ride to go someplace. And a helicopter picked me up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and we flew 30 miles through the jungle. There's no lights. How this pilot found this hilltop, I haven't got a clue. We climbed the mountain by him taking his blades into the jungle till he could hear them hit leaves, back off and climb. Enter, back off and climb. Until he didn't hear anything more, and he moved forward and landed, and there I was at 2 o'clock in the morning. My sergeant welcomed me to the 4-deuce mortar platoon, said, sleep there, and I'll talk to you in the morning. And that was my introduction to the 4-deuce mortar platoon. Most of you guys hated being on those places because we were there for weeks and weeks at a time as sitting ducks.
Right.
And you guys didn't like that. So I didn't
No.
want to be where you were, and you didn't want to be where I was.
Well, when the day broke,
Yes.
and you saw that people were alive around you, how did it go?
Well, this started out as just a fire base, which had been, they usually put us on a hilltop where the ground pounders and you, the grunts, were going to work within a 5-kilometer area because our guns could fire about 5 kilometers in any direction. So the Army had picked this hilltop because it was the tallest one, which was a safety issue.
Right.
Called the Navy and asked the New Jersey to blow off the top of the mountain with their 16-inch guns, which they did. Then the Seabees came in with bulldozers and smoothed
Leveled
the top off,
Yeah.
and then said, gentlemen, here's your new home. And so by the time I got there, the gun pits were already built. These were plastic sandbags built in a circle with each gun. We had 4 guns where each gun was in there.
Right.
I was assigned to the 2nd squad, and low man on the totem pole. My job was to carry ammunition
I
from
was going to say move ammo.
from the ammo dump to the pits.
Right.
And I had to move so much based on how much was fired in the
Right.
previous 24 hours. I did that for a few weeks, and it was, it's just every day is the same. If you're a morning person, you got up and you walked around in your boxer shorts and with your fly. I don't know where we got black safety pins, but we did, and we put them in our flies. And we wore sandals or boots or what have you, and you ate. Everybody ate whenever they wanted to. You just go over to this stack of C rations, and you'd pick out some of the meals
Your
that you
meal.
liked and then throw the rest away. And then the late risers would get up and eat their food, and that would be the day. Sometime about 4 or 5 in the evening, there was a squad meeting on what Delta Tangos, the defensive targets we would be firing that night. These would be based on maps that we had. We would look at trails, especially trails that intersected, and we'd say, okay, if I was a bad guy, when would I be at this spot? And the Fire Direction Center would say they would probably be there at 0200. And so number 2 gun or whatever would fire on that spot at that particular time. And these were Delta Tangos we fired all night long. These guns could not fire within 1,000 meters of themselves because it's high angle. So if the enemy came within 1,000 meters of us, we're relying on the infantry that is our base defense, which is usually maybe 30 people out of a company that are there because they got jungle rot or something. They just need a break. Or we'd have to pick up our own M16s and fire. So we tried to fire out and keep them out there. I did that for a while. And somebody back at the company area realized I was a college graduate and probably could spell. Well, they were wrong there, but they asked me to come back and be the company clerk.
Oh.
And I thought, cool. Yeah, I sleep in a bed, and showers and, meals. Well, the first night I was there, and I slept in an individual sandbag tented area. The first night I was there, the guy who slept over here, he got hit with a rocket and died. The next night, the guy over here got hit with a rocket and died. And I thought, this is why they call it Rocket City. Well, I lasted my probationary period of 1 week, at which time the guy by the name of Wop, because he was Italian, we all had nicknames. We didn't really want to know what our names were. Wop came to me and said, "You having fun?" I said, "No." He said, "You want to come back to the mortar platoon?" I said, "And carry ammo?" "No." He said, "How would you like to be in the Fire Direction Center?" I said, "What's that?" And he explained to me, and I said, "I love it." He went to the captain, and the captain says, "Private Head's going back with me." And I said, "Cool." So I went to the Fire Direction Center, and I stayed there the rest of the time I was in the service.
Directing shots.
The guys that we came and were the replacements for were trained in Schofield Barracks in Hawaii.
25th Infantry.
These guys were well trained, and I got into the Fire Direction Center, and we spent maybe 3 to 4 hours a day in training. Every day. Practice fire missions, setting up Delta Tangos, goes on and on and on. How much ammo does number 2 pit have? What's the weather forecast? When will we be resupplied? On and on. It was phenomenal, the training they gave us. They didn't have to. These guys weren't told to do that. We had no officers.
Oh.
The highest ranking person in our group had been drafted 2 years before. It was Lord of the Flies. We just sat around and said, "What do you think we ought to do?" And we made it up. We were good. We were very, very good. We learned some techniques, things that saved so many lives, and introduced them to other people. It's where I became fascinated with training, and I spent the rest of my life in education and training based on my military experience, on looking at the lowest common denominator and relating it to the individual. So from there, we just did hill hopping. We went from that hill to other hills and did basically the same thing, firing for the whoever was working in that area at the time.
So training is fulfilling and satisfying when you one have a goal to reach, and you can educate or prepare someone to go ahead and accomplish that and do it well.
I learned very early that to be a good educator or trainer, in my opinion, and I would do this on individual basis no matter what situation I was in, I would tell them that I would be their facilitator. I will help them be the best that they can be because that's what I'm good at. But I will not ask them to be any more than they see themselves being. And later on, when I was teaching at a college level, I had this student come to me at the end of the semester and said, you know, I got a C in this class. And I said, yeah, I kept working to try to get you a B or whatever. And they said, all I wanted was a C. I'm thinking, I'm working harder than they are. Mm-hmm. And so that's where it really cemented in my mind. And I was critical to let people know, I'm facilitating your learning. I will take whatever it is, I'll break it down to the smallest, the lowest common denominator, and teach you the steps to be the best you want to be, but no more.
That's right.
And that's helped me because there's a lot of failures along the line.
You
if I
have to
wanted
give
everybody.
up. Right. You have to give way. And you can't push someone to go beyond what they want.
No. So I'm at a reunion, and I get under my door this little note, and it says, Jack Head, are you the sergeant head that was in a mortar platoon in Vietnam? And then it has this guy's name at the bottom. And I'm going, yeah, that's all right, but who is this guy? I don't recognize his name. And there's about 30 of us in this platoon, so we know a little bit about everybody. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that night at the reunion dinner, the banquet, everybody was at an assigned table. So I looked his name up on the piece of paper, matched it, and go, he's in table 8. And I went over and I says, is Larry, and I don't remember his last name, here? And he stood up and he says, Jack. And I said, hi. And he says, you remember me? Well, hell, it's been 50 years. Some of us have put on some weight.
Oh, yeah.
And he
had. Yeah. We don't look
So we had
same.
this great conversation, and he said to me, first of all, he's an American Indian.
Oh.
And when he got out of the service, he changed his name back to his traditional tribal name.
Right.
And that's what he had signed on here. Well, no wonder I didn't know who it was.
Right.
But he said to me, he said he got wounded when we were on LZ Jeff and got medevaced out. But when he came back, he was healed and everything and signed up for a second tour. And he said, I did it because there are two types of sergeants. There's the one that's almost a dictator. And I'm in charge, I'll tell you what to do, and you just do it. Mm-hmm. And then there's the teacher. And he says, you're a teacher. And I signed up for my second tour because I wanted to be like Jack Head. Wow, what a thrilling.
Well, that's outstanding.
Yeah.
That is outstanding.
Yeah.
So you are a teacher, and you discovered that you were a teacher back then.
Yes, that's when I learned it.
And that's influenced the rest of your life.
The rest of my life. Yeah.
You've written a book.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Selected Memories. And the purpose for writing the book?
I was working at Hillenbrand Industries and had the opportunity to go to a convention, funeral directors convention in Canada. Mm-hmm. And I had met a fellow vendor on one of the other conventions. And I said, hey, Norm, I'm going to be in Canada, blah, blah, blah. And he said, well, you're not staying at the hotel. You're staying with Rose and me at the house. At the house. Nancy says, do you know anything about him? I says, no. He's a veteran. Canadian veteran. That's all I need to know. Mm-hmm. And I've seen him once. So I went to his house. And on Wednesday night, I'd been there all week. Wednesday, he finally said, okay, Rose and I have been putting this off, but we want to ask you about your experience in Vietnam. So I told him a few stories. He started shaking his head. Now, Norm is a journalist. He writes every day. He's got volumes. And For what, I don't know, because I never was a journal. I never did that. I never had a diary or anything.
Right.
He says, Jack, he says, this stuff is just, you got to get rid of this stuff. I said, what do you mean get rid of it? He said, I know it's yours and it's your story, but does it bother you? And I said, yeah. I said, I got a lot of nightmares. He says, well, to get rid of it, you write it. I said, you're asking me to write? He said, yeah. So I did. Make a long story short, I started writing, and mostly it's because he'd call me or send me an email. What have you written today?
Remind you.
Did I do anything today? Have you done this? So I wrote. I wrote for about 5 years, and I ended up with about 1,000 pages or more. At this point, I was remarried to Nancy Wilson, Cecil Wilson, who's from Connersville.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, both my father-in-laws served in the Navy in World War II. Austin McGraw would never talk about it, which is typical of my dad and most of my uncles who served. Just wouldn't talk about it. And yet our generation is being told, you got to talk about it. You know, it's healing.
Right.
So who am I supposed to be? The emulating of my father and that role model, or this? Anyway, so I get about 1,000 pages after 5 years, and the best proofreader I've ever had in the world has been my wife, Nancy. And I said, I want you to read this. Now, she didn't know me back then.
Right.
She met me once I came back to Connersville back in 1970.
It's a new person.
Yeah, the new normal, the new Jack.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So she's brutal. She said, first of all, nobody's going to read 1,000 pages. She says, I know your friends. You know, got to have a lot of pictures, and it's got to be a lot shorter than that. So she's got this stack of papers. She's sitting there. She's going, you've already said this. That's redundant too. Nobody cares about this. And the pages are throwing out there. And she's got, about 200 pages down there, and she says, how do you feel about this? And I said, I don't care. The story's been written. I said, you could tell me that I should have this chapter before this chapter, but it didn't happen that way.
Mm-hmm.
She said, and tell me again why you wrote this. And I said, I have 4 kids, and you, and other family members that I want you to know my story, but I don't want to tell it. Read it. So I did it for you. And I've had friends who said, if you ever write a book, I'll buy it. So that's what it is. Oh, she says, okay. And she kept going. And she kept throwing these pages down there. She got all done. She says, okay, here's your book. Publish it. And I did. Since then, I've worked on other issues that I've had about the military. And I've been practicing being a better writer. It's not my normal means of communication. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I have rewritten the book, this book. And this one just came out like a month ago. I'm very proud of this. I think it tells a good story about somebody that's in Vietnam.
And the title is
Selected Memories
of Vietnam, 69-70.
And those are the years that I was there. I met on someplace on the internet, a guy by the name of Bernie Weiss. Bernie Weiss is a Vietnam historian. And he said, I've read your first book, and I understand you're rewriting it. And I said, yeah, I'm adding some pictures. And he says, anything else? And I said, yeah, a lot of other stuff. But he said, it's probably one of the best 5 books on Vietnam I've ever read, because it's about you who are on the ground and what you actually did. Mm-hmm. I mean, the joke at most of our reunions is the book on what they carried. Well, most of the stuff that guy wrote about, we never saw. We never saw 45. None of us had 45s. None of us had M79 grenade launchers. That was, some of you guys might have had them,
right.
Whatever. He talked about that and carrying mortar tubes and all this, and we went, anyway. So I'm very proud of it because I'm getting accolades from people who have been there, have experienced it, and have used this to say to their family members, read this. This tells you about me. because I can't write it.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
What lessons do you think you've learned as a result of your service, your time in service?
Mostly detrimental. I question leadership when they can't give me an end game or what are we trying to do. When my boss says, okay, I want you to work on this project, and I say, when it's done, what do you want it to look like? Mm-hmm. How long do I have? What do you want me to do with it? I'm fearful of people who are absentee leaders. When Suits in Washington, LBJ is actually giving, no, I want the plane to fly from here to here and do this with the Agent Orange. Mm-hmm. What in the world, when the people in Westmoreland and Colin Powell was in our unit, these guys were fearful of their own lives because of what was being done in Washington, and people at higher levels. It's not the way to run anything, and so
Right.
I have been very much of a rebel to authority. I question it with can you tell me why you did that, or why we have to do this? So I question.
You've been a teacher,
Yes.
or you are a teacher.
I finally retired. Yes.
What did you go to? What subject did you go into, or what did you teach?
For Indiana University, I taught introduction to business and marketing and salesmanship classes.
Okay.
At Purdue University, I taught classes in their leadership programs. When I was at Hillenbrand, I had trainers who I sent all over the world for great training classes, until finally one day I said, I'm going to become selfish. So I've been to Ken Blanchard's house. Margie, his wife, has cooked. So I know the situational leadership classes, and I've had those kind of experiences. So when I went to higher education in my third occupation, I had all these credentials. And wow. So those were impressive because I could bring business situations into academia. I think the students liked that because it was real world situations that I was introducing them to, as opposed to textbook learning.
Hypothetical.
Hypothetical, yeah.
What would you like? What would you like people to know, or anyone to know about you and your character as a result of your service?
I am very loyal to the Constitution of this country and for the process of law. We are a land of laws. In Vietnam, we followed the laws. If there was a ceasefire, we ceasefired. I think our unit in Vietnam was honored, feared, and didn't want to have anything to do with us by the enemy, because we did what we said we were going to do. I was nicknamed the headhunter. Everybody had a nickname, so I had to have, whatever. So mine was a headhunter. And when a line company came under attack, they had an artillery forward observer with them, whose job it was to call artillery and ask for support. We misappropriated enough radios, Prick 25 radios, that we monitored every company within the area that we could shoot at. So we were listening to anywhere from 3 to 5 radios at a time.
Which gave you an immediate response.
Yes. So as soon as we heard a firefight, we aimed a gun on our troops and waited. The gun was up and running. There was somebody cradling ammunition in their arms, ready to drop them down the tube at my command. And we would wait for the word, headhunter. I'd say, yeah. He'd say, we need help. I'd say to the left or to the right. And he'd say to the left or the right until that gun kicked the base plate to the left. Fire. Well, you see, before firing, you're supposed to get clearance from MACV, which is the CIA, the local landowners, or the mayor, or the
Right.
village chief, or what have you.
Right.
We bypassed those steps, and we started firing. Well, often, as soon as the bad guys heard, because they were monitoring radios too, that the headhunter was firing, they quit firing and ran as fast as they could.
They would disconnect.
They knew because they didn't have time to recover. It wasn't like, okay, artillery's going to get this clearance and then this clearance and then this clearance, so we've got another 15 minutes. They didn't have 15 minutes with us. And so we fired a shotgun pattern. We would fire on the target, and the other 3 guns would fire back into the jungle in every direction.
Where they would be running.
Where they would be running.
Right.
So they knew they didn't have a chance if the headhunter was called. And I got called on the carpet because I wasn't using proper protocol, or I didn't get the proper clearance, and I would have to fill out all these paperwork and all that, and then I would, next thing you know, some captain or some lieutenant would come on the landing zone and says, "Did you get in trouble?" And I go, "Yeah." And he says, "I'll take care of it. You saved this many lives." So that's been beneficial, but I have to be careful about that in civilian life.
You have your unit flag,
Yeah.
Jack. I'd like to show that. Pull your way a little bit.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Got it. I think that the biggest aha for me has been the acceptance of who I am now, this new normal. I am not the Jack Head that went overseas. I spent 14 months over there. I got to the point where they said, "Okay, you can go back, and we'll station you someplace in the United States where you can simulate war conditions." And I thought, oh my gosh. I said, how can I not do that? And they said, well, if you stay here, and when you get back to the world, you have less than 180 days to serve,
Oh, right.
you just go home. And I said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I will stay 54
that.
extra days.
Sure.
And I
Sure.
did. And at that point, the last 2 months I was there, I worked directly for the colonel, training people on mortars to be faster and more efficient at what they were doing. And just so I travel around and train the people in mortars.
You were a tremendous asset to
Yeah,
us.
the colonel saw what we were doing. Never, he forgot all the times I had to. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Sorry.
Okay, we've been talking with Jack Head this last half hour. Jack served in Vietnam with 4 Deuce mortars, and we want to thank you for your service. We appreciate
Thank you.
all that you've done, and we appreciate the way that you're carrying on now as a result. We believe that you're a better man.
Thank you. Thank you very much.